Blues win. Blues win. They've tied it up. We're at 2-2. Another dominating victory by the Blues at home. And we are tied at 2s, heading back to the frozen tundra of Winnipeg. Jacob Stanoch, Thomas Welch. This is Blues Hub postgame presented by Hot Shots here on Sports Hub STL, presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. No better time. Let's get right into it. Blues, another dominating victory against the Jets in Game 2. The crowd was in it. Everyone was rocking. The city was alive, and they get a 5-1 win. Thomas, opening thoughts on this amazing victory by the Blues once again.
I feel like the one that's going to get the most attention is the one that we should start with, and that is Connor Hellebuyck getting yanked again for the second time in a row. A brutal save percentage in his time in St. Louis so far in this playoff series. And we know that the playoff Hellebuyck accusations are alive and well. So if you're Winnipeg Jets fans, obviously you saw Comrie go in. Are you expecting Comrie to start next game, even though you're back home with Connor Hellebuyck? He's coming off a Vezina winning season. Like, there's a lot of question marks surrounding it right now. But for me, personally, going back to even before the playoffs started, I wanted to play the Winnipeg Jets because of the narrative that existed between Jordan Binnington and Connor Hellebuyck, going back to Four Nations, Jordan Binnington getting the better of him, but really the overall reoccurring theme of Jordan Binnington being the single best big game goaltender in the NHL. We see what difference that makes in a playoff series with your back against the wall, against the best team in the NHL all season long, against the President's Trophy winner, against the Vezina winner. It doesn't matter. Jordan Binnington is nails. And this Blues team is off and rolling. Guaranteed 6-game series now against the best team in the league when we didn't even have thoughts or wonders of a playoff series happening until the last 2 months of the entire season. If you're a Blues fan, you're feeling great right now because you're even in the series. But in terms of the goal tally, it's a night and day difference when you come and play at Enterprise. So if you're banking on Game 6, we have a 2-game sample size of what that looks like for the St. Louis Blues and the Winnipeg Jets. That gives you 2 opportunities to go win 1 away game, and that potentially would be the difference in the series. So all good things, obviously, for the St. Louis Blues. Feels like it was a carbon copy of last game in terms of how you generate that success. Saw Tyler Tucker go down, which is not great because he had the game-winning goal, I believe, on the night. So a lot of things to talk about. I know Ethan and Brenden on location live talking to the coaches, boots on the ground press conference, are going to be joining us again to hear exactly what the players and the coaches say. So I cannot wait. Thank you guys all for tuning in. We are guaranteed a Game 6 in this series. This team just continues to impress, continues their foot on the gas, and it doesn't look like they're stopping anytime soon.
And the best part about that, too, is that if they can take one, you're also guaranteed Game 6 in St. Louis. Exactly. So it's coming back here for at least one. Well, yeah, hopefully more than just one more, but that would mean they win the series. So they can take one from Winnipeg. That's all you need. You need to get one on the road. It's been all home teams, but
active 14-game win streak at home. That's huge. They know that.
Huge. Yeah, the biggest conversation is always who can win the away game. The Blues on the away side have been in pretty much essentially 2 1-goal games. Obviously, the one had the empty netter, but they're by the most part 2 1-goal games without the free open net.
Right.
Jets, on the other hand, on the road get blown out.
Yeah.
By, let me put some numbers together. This was 7-2 last night. So put those together. They've been blown out. A 9-goal difference between the Jets and the Blues in St. Louis to a 3-goal difference in Winnipeg. So I'm liking the thought of being on the road right now. Considering how Binnington's playing, considering how the Blues are, they're right there on the road. Yet the Jets on the road had no answer. They really hadn't. And you think today, they get the answer, a slow first period, able to score first, and then Neighbors with a nasty, nasty deflection at the end of the period. Couldn't have come at a better time. I mean, it seemed like after that, the roof was going to come off. The ceiling was gone. It was all Blues. And that's exactly how it panned out. So obviously, I mean, the big difference was Took them, 19 minutes instead of 1 minute to score the first goal, yet it still
They still got there.
same result. And that was the Jets' response. They played the first period well, they responded well, and the Blues did an even better job responding to the response, and they get the big win today. And I mean, you can't have it any better than knowing what the Jets were going to throw at you and responding even better than the Jets responding to the game last night. That's fantastic, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things that we talked about last game in the Winnipeg Jets being the President's Trophy winner and how successful they have been throughout the course of this entire regular season is this feels like a team that is not used to overcoming adversity. Like they're playing, from the lead, which 9 times out of 10 with Connor Hellebuyck, regular season Connor Hellebuyck, but Connor Hellebuyck in goal, you are playing with the lead, or he's at least going to keep, the opposing team under 3 goals. So, you always have a chance in these games. But the playoffs are a different beast. And this St. Louis Blues team, when you talk about overcoming adversity, there is not a better example of that in the NHL right now than I think the St. Louis Blues. And I know last game we were talking about that goal that was, not allowed. And I know Perfetti had some words after the game thinking that he was still convinced that it went in. But Winnipeg Jets fans were everywhere on Twitter like, oh, that puck goes in, it's a completely different ball game. But I don't think they realized that the second that they did end up scoring their first goal of the game, last game, we scored 3 immediately after, and Buchnevich scored like a minute after. And that's just the kind of play that we've come to expect from the St. Louis Blues, but it radiates from Jordan Binnington too. Like if you reverse the roles here and put Jordan Binnington in the scenario that Connor Hellebuyck was in tonight, like dangerous, away game with a crowd just downfall constantly, getting in your head with the Connor chance. Like Jordan Binnington thrives in those environments, right? And we kind of saw it in 2019 when I forget which game it was, but the Blues got blown out. And Jordan Binnington came back the next game, stood on his head, and just kind of, became the Grim Reaper. I don't think Connor Hellebuyck has that dog in him at all. And I think that's why these Connor chants, even when he's out of the game, we want Connor, is crazy. But I think as he's watching, as he's listening, like that's radiating in his head. And he's thinking about that. Like that was one of the things we talked about last game. Like, can he flush, right? Come out next game, not think about any of that, and just go like absolutely eyes rolled in the back of the head, like play crazy Connor Hellebuyck style of hockey that we're accustomed to. And he didn't. He wasn't able to. And I don't know if that's, something mentally or just something that positioning wise, or if the lights are too bright for him right now, but it's very possible because we've seen that be a reoccurring theme for him. With Jordan Binnington, it's completely different, but I feel like both of these teams go as their goalies do, or that they at least match that energy. So for the Winnipeg Jets, like if you're down 1 goal, if you're down 2 goals, you're down 3 goals, like next thing you know, you see guys like start throwing tantrums, like slashing guys in the back of the leg, like taking liabilities, like taking bad penalties, not thinking as much, getting frustrated. And I think Connor Hellebuyck goes the same way. And that is potentially why we see the series 2-2 right now, and why the Winnipeg Jets have struggled in Enterprise Center, for me personally.
And I think the biggest thing that resonated with me, obviously, I'm listening to talk radio throughout this week, especially after Thursday, was can the Blues play or win in a tight game? Well, you look at the numbers today. It was a tight game. Blues gets outshot 31-24. They lose the faceoff percentage by 0.8, 50.9 to 49.1. Both teams did no power play goals. First time the series, either team has not scored a power play goal. First time also for the Blues that they have not scored a power play goal in a game. Penalty minutes 36-24 after all of the, again, fun misconducts at the end of the game. Hits 40-40, dead even. Blues with 20 block shots, 11 just for the Jets. Takeaway 6-2 in favor of the Blues. So by the numbers, tight game. But in a tight game where the Blues, outside of the scoring, the thing we found, if the Blues have a tight game while scoring, or a tight game by the numbers, I should say, outside of the scoring, they seem to put up 3, 4, 5 goals in a game. If they're getting blown out or kind of, outplayed by the numbers, then that's when you see what happened in game 1, game 2. But, technically speaking, the Blues won a tight game today. They won a close game today by the numbers, but they took it and put in 5 goals on top of that as well in the face of a tight game throughout pretty much every single period. The Jets never backed away, but the Blues, they just kept scoring. And that's what helped it keep it, or at least seem like it was way out of reach for Winnipeg.
Yeah, and I don't think any President Trophy winning team gets to that point by accident. So I think the argument could be made that the Winnipeg Jets do have a very deep team and are successful because of it. But I don't know that they're getting the secondary scoring that the St. Louis Blues have been able to generate down the stretch. And we've kind of seen that divide tonight. Kyle Connor scored for the Winnipeg Jets, which is who we expected to be on the score sheet, right? Like that team goes as Connor and Scheifele goes 1,000%. For the Blues, it was Jake Neighbors, Tyler Tucker, Braden Shen, Justin Falk, and then finally Robert Thomas at the end, who if you're a Jets fan, you're expecting Robert Thomas to carry the load. And he's not even putting the puck in the back of the net until the third period when it's already almost out of hand. So I think that's big for the St. Louis Blues. And, maybe having that last line change has been helpful to them to generate the matchups that they're looking at and kind of isolate and neutralize Kyle Connor and Scheifele. But if they're able to do that on the road, there's no doubt in my mind that you can generate the same results that we're getting at home, because as cool as the whiteout is in Winnipeg and as unfriendly of an atmosphere as that is, first of all, I don't know if anything can match the way that Enterprise was rocking tonight. We talked with Brenden Schaeffer and Ethan Hannaford, who will join us later, last game, and they were like, "This, I have not heard it this loud since 2019," and that's crazy. Because obviously we went deep into the playoffs and won the whole Stanley Cup that season. But from an expectation standpoint, that season always had a team that we knew was capable of winning the Stanley Cup, and they were just underperforming. Even at this point that we're at right now, I don't know that everybody's on the bandwagon that this team is capable of winning a Stanley Cup. So the expectation difference there, I think, is massive. And I think that's why we're seeing this massive pop of people just being like, holy crap, this team is playing way above expectations than anything that anybody imagined this season, going on the win streak, going on the home game win streak that they're on currently right now. I mean, everything is looking right for the St. Louis Blues in terms of where they're at in this matchup, 2-2 series, tying it up at home. Just go out, handle your business. You've learned a lot in these 4 games, right? Let's take that, put pen to paper, strategize. How do we take care of business in an away game against Winnipeg Jets? Like you talked about, Jacob, they've been close games in this series so far. If they can flip one of those games, bring it to a game 6 where you have the capability to clinch at home, there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to do that.
And we just saw it there a little bit. Bitter getting the top star of the game. Hellebuck getting pulled is a perfect troll. Even though he probably deserved it. Richard Clan also saw it earlier. Was going to mention it of Needy Ninja, I think is how you say it. NEDE Ninja 420 space then F. The names are getting a little interesting nowadays, but no, he said bitter in the net, like a goal with a brick emoji. Best way to put it. Talk about Binnington these past few games. I mean, obviously you said it. Binnington's been known as a big game goaltender. Hellebuck hasn't been showing up, but I mean, Binnington, the goals, and I think the big difference is to set him and Hellebuck apart in this series. The goals that Binnington has let up are tough rebounds, really hard deflections, or plays where unless you're like the Flash, you're not saving them. Hellebuck has let in some kind of softies, throughout this series. And I mean, but right now I want to focus on Binnington. He's been playing unreal. He's playing arguably the best he's played since the Four Nations, which again, hard to beat in the Four Nations break, but I think he's playing just as good. And man, you just gotta love it. You just gotta love it.
Yeah, and it's obvious that Jordan Binnington has gone on record before in saying that his favorite athlete of all time is Michael Jordan. I think he taps into that mindset of, even just seeing the quote from 2019 being like, this is huge implications for a rookie to come in and play the way that you have. Like, there's a lot of pressure on you. Are you nervous? He's like, do I look nervous? I'm built for this. And he's been consistent with that. Like, whether you want to bring up his save percentages, when we got bounced in the bubble playoff series by the Vancouver Canucks, or whether he got ran over and steamrolled in the Colorado Avalanche in that series, like, Jordan Binnington has always been a staple of success for this team, really in the regular season, but definitely in the playoffs. It's just been, this team has, kind of failed him from the defensive side of the puck, and neutralizing chances in front of him. And so for this team with this defensive core, now we talk about how many games in the NHL that they have, the veteran presence alongside Tyler Tucker, who, looks like he's getting better every game and has the youth and has the size and has the tenacity and has the snapper. My God, what a shot tonight to get the game-winning goal. I mean, it's stuff you read about, It's like Jordan Binnington being a focal point of this team and being someone that you can rely on radiates through the rest of the team and gives them confidence. And I think for Connor Hellebuyck, throughout the regular season, he provided that radiance for the Jets too. But now that he's struggling, the Jets need to have other people step up, and like really the team around Hellebuyck step up to even make less chances for the Blues offensively because he's struggling. It's a push and pull, tug of war thing to where, if one guy's feeling down, you got to do something to lift him up. And the Jets right now are not doing enough to lift up Connor Hellebuyck. And that might be tough to do, because if he's pulling like a, sub 800 save percentage, there's not much you can do to keep. And it looks like I said last game, it looks like he just goes out there and he's not even wearing a glove. Like, high glove side is just open all day for him. He's just swinging and missing. So whether they go with Comrie or whether they go with Hellebuyck, I still like the Blues' chances moving forward. You just got to grab one of these away games and then you're moving on to the next round. And probably, like, I wouldn't say probably, but you do have the potential to face a team that's not as tough to play against the Winnipeg Jets. It's just the fact that the Blues are playing red hot, best team in the NHL hockey right now, and they look like unstoppable, specifically on home ice these last two games.
I mean, it's just been insane, this style of play. And the thing that's really been talked about a lot as well is the confidence to get to the net. And I think, you talk, like, I think there's a lot of question of, obviously, I should say, after Binnington got, run into quite a bit, everyone's like, why don't the Blues run into the goalie? I think this is their version of running the goalie, getting close to the net, getting pucks in close and putting them away. That does more damage than running into a guy. It's beating him right in front of his face. Schenn did it today. Thomas did it today on the final goal. I mean, Neighbors right in front with a great deflection. They're getting in close. The Tucker goal and the Falk goal were the only goals that did not happen directly in front of him. And they were from the blue line, which is demoralizing enough in itself. But they're getting closer and closer to the net. They did these past few games. They did it perfectly again today. That's the response you want to see, getting in close, getting the confidence. And in my opinion, I think that's what their version of running the goaltender has been following what happened to Binnington.
I think so too. And it's like you said, it's not necessarily like you don't have to go into Hellebuyck full speed and like try to hurt the guy. Like, nobody ever wants to see that. I want to beat the best teams in the NHL at their best, which we can talk about Ehlers and Velarde, where it sounded like Velarde was taking warmups today, but ended up not playing, which I thought was interesting. Maybe that's a little bit of, lineup shenanigans. We saw Jim Montgomery talking about that with Joseph and Tessier too. So, but yeah, I think it's not about bowling over Hellebuyck and injuring him and getting him out of the game, because you can get him out of the game without injuring him, like you said. Just putting the puck in the back of the net, but it's making him nervous and, trying to see around people or like, moving traffic in front of him. And even after the play, right? Like, making sure that he does have the puck all the way cleaned up. And I think Brayden Schenn's goal is a perfect example of that. Like, he goes for the poke check, the puck's on his stick, Brayden Schenn just follows it up, see the puck laying there, kind of scoops it and throws it into the back of the net. So it's not always like, it's not always about like doing a hockey stop on a guy's forehead like Corey Perry, but it's making sure you clean up the trash in front of the net when it's available. And I think the Blues have done a great job of that.
So I looked over at the chat and I saw something come in from M. Gill Design. I think the Jets are trying to acquire Nazem Kadri before next game. I think that leads us into the best way. I'm not going to say any words on it because I could go on for a long time. But what are the thoughts on, once again, the final minute shenanigans by the Jets where Lowry threw a glove into the stands and just started trying to throw haymakers at the Blues at the bench and
I think
everything else going on?
Yeah, I mean I think that's just a prime example of them not being a disciplined team, right? Or like not being able to overcome adversity. Like, like not to say that like every team that gets stomped out 5-1 in a way barn is gonna go up like, leave the ice with a whimper and be like, oh, what can we do? Like, I understand that it's a playoffs and there's like a lot of emotions flying around, but it really felt like once that game got out of hand for the Winnipeg Jets, it almost felt like they had like more intentions in trying to slash Bolduc or getting Jimmy Snuggerud's face. Like you said, Lowry at the end of the game has his gloves off, hammering on a guy that like on the back of his head. Like that's not playoff hockey. That's not discipline. That's, oh, we're getting stomped out and we're not used to this because we haven't been stomped out throughout the course of this entire season. My wires are crossed and I'm going to take it out on the closest guy that I'm able to. That just ended up being Zachary Bolduc, and I think Sundqvist was in there as well. So I don't think that's an example of a tactical mind tricks. We're trying to injure people at the end of the game. I think it's just wires crossed. Like we don't know what else to do. I'm going to take out all of this pent up emotion on the player that's closest next to me.
Certainly what it looked like, as Lowry literally just kind of looked around like, okay, let's grab the nearest blue jersey and just go after it. I think right now the big worry is Tucker. He went down awkwardly with the knee. I mean, just off the lookout, obviously we haven't heard anything. There is a slight chance, and I think that's more of a definite chance that he probably is not playing in Winnipeg Wednesday. Obviously, it sucks to have Tucker gone right now. He's been playing great, had the game-winning goal. So with that in mind, do we go Suter or Kessel in place if Tucker is not ready to go on Wednesday?
I think you're definitely taking the veteran and Suter there, especially with 2 games of rest with him and how many NHL games that he's played, and his tenacity and his want to be successful and have a team move on in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I don't know if he's had I don't think he has a Stanley Cup to his name, so I think that'd be huge for him. And like you want guys in your lineup that want it, and I think all things considered, we do talk about this Blues lineup not having a lot of the same guys from the 2019 team. But at the same time, like if there is some kind of thought process to where once you get a Stanley Cup, you kind of take the foot off the gas a little bit. We've got a bunch of guys that don't have Stanley Cups anymore. So I'm sure they're going to be, powered up and want to move on and go get there first. So I think Suter makes the most sense for me from a veteran standpoint. But like I said, also, like if the biggest knock on him was his skating ability and his cardio and, his age, like getting 2 games off, getting your fresh legs under you, kind of watching from the press box and then coming in, fresh with a new ambition and trying to match the energy that has been going on for the last 4 games. There's a lot. I mean, we talked about it last game. There was 128 hits total, and that like everybody that was involved in that game is taking bumps, bruises, putting on the ice packs in the morning. And it's going to affect them for the rest of the series. Ryan Suter was not in that game. So in that regard, just in terms of a health prospect, like he's going to have a leg up on some of these guys and maybe take more liabilities and, how he's burying guys into the boards, which is always fun to see. So I think it's Suter in the event that Tucker doesn't play. But I also think that in the event that Tucker avoided anything like catastrophic or long-term or serious with his leg, it looked like his ankle kind of got bent up under him. We've got one of the best physical trainer guys in the league in Barilli. So he'll be able to tell him pretty quickly, what's going on and what he should do. But yeah, if Tucker doesn't play, I think it's Suter. But if it's not something that's, vehemently serious, I think Tucker will do everything he can to play next game.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I was talking with one of my friends earlier. Kind of the thought is pretty much going to be probably Suter. And that was my thought as well, just because I like Kessel. He's got that speed, but again, that the big inexperience and the veteran presence of Suter. That's just the two things that I'd rather have Suter in that spot purely just because Kessel hasn't been before.
And we've seen the size benefit the Blues too. I mean, when they slotted in Texier for Joseph, I think that created a huge boost for this team. And maybe it helped the fact that, that change happened once we were going home. But I think the size factor of Texier has been more beneficial to the team than the playmaking and speed of Joseph. And that's not to say that Joseph sucks. It's just in terms of a matchup. The Winnipeg Jets are a heavy, huge team. So I think Suter's a bigger body back there than Kessel. I think by default that makes more sense too in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, because you never know, Joseph could, if the Blues manage to move on, it could honestly be a situation where Joseph might be a better situation for whoever they'd play, either the Stars or the Avalanche, or we could want to stay with Texier. Either way, which again, I think is a good thing about this Blues lineup is that these are guys that, really that can be slotted in, not because one guy's better than the other, but because they might match up better with this guy. Or it's like, I think it just speaks a lot to the depth is what I'm trying to say. Quick scoreboard update for anyone interested in some of the hockey going around. Only game going on right now, Hurricanes Devils. Hurricanes up 2-0 right now. They lead that series 2-1 over New Jersey. Jacob Slavin getting his first of the postseason to put them up 2-0 in New Jersey. That would certainly be a fun series, I think, to be a part of it. That's always kind of the sad part. There's always a lot of Eastern teams that you can't play until you get to the final. And there's a couple of series every now and then where I'm just like, I kind of want to see what that atmosphere is like from an opposing fan. It's like obviously we have the Jets, but I would love to see what it's like to play Carolina or play the Rangers when they're in their prime spot. It's that kind of area would be kind of neat to see. But of course, East-West doesn't really work that way. But looking at today, again, I think what we got to hand it to is the fans right now. We'll ask Ethan and Brenden about this again when they hop on. But before we get to our quick ad break, want to just talk about really quickly. It's a noon Sunday game, and everywhere was buzzing through the roof. Enterprise was going off. Ballpark Village was unreal. Everywhere. I mean, heck, there's probably fans that are blowing roofs off their own houses with how exciting it was, for all I know. So that is just fantastic. The Blues fans are electric right now, and there's no better time for hockey here in the Lou. I mean, because even when you see that on a noon game on a Sunday in April, I think that's pretty good, especially when the Cardinals are in town. So that's when the Cardinals have a home game and you're doing that kind of stuff. It's pretty good.
And historically too, I think the Blues have always just as long as I can remember have struggled during day games. So that's kind of looming over your head too as a dark cloud. Seeing this time slot and seeing this matchup for the Blues, it's like, God, everything feels great. We just blew them out at home. We get another home game against the best team in the NHL. We know what they're capable of. We know what Connor Hellebuck's capable of. Please don't come out like half asleep just because you missed like your nap time that you're used to, and like those earlier start times, or like you had to cut your chicken parm a little bit short, throw off the routine, all of those things. Like that's the stuff you think about, right? And with the Blues consistently struggle in day games, like that's what you're worried about is messing up that routine. But the boys came out flying. Like you said, it just took a little bit longer than we saw last game to get to that point of their game where they were just dominating, but they got there all the same. It's not just the Sparky back in the chat. And I know he was talking about how he was nervous about the St. Louis Blues. So it's cool that we're now tied up 2-2 in the series. It's probably not the result that you want, Sparky, but I'd still appreciate you staying on business and coming in this chat surrounded by Blues fans, like, rabid hyenas probably ready to prey on the meat that you are. But I will say, even from an unbiased standpoint, if I'm a hockey fan watching this Winnipeg Jets versus St. Louis Blues series, unbiased standpoint, I feel like from the energy that the Winnipeg Jets crowd started this series with the wideout, with the chance, with how loud that they were on every single play, and then the Blues matching it in their 2-game stint at home. I don't think there's a better series in the NHL playoffs right now than the Winnipeg Jets versus the St. Louis Blues, and that's pretty cool for both of us. As we're tied 2-2, basically resetting the series, anybody can win. Feels like the Blues have momentum, but, like I said, handshake deal. It's cool that we've done this so far together. Put on a matinee for everybody to see on the national stage for the NHL.
Well, don't forget right now, probably the best time to get in on the action with right now, probably the best time for sports betting. So download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code STL Sports. That is code STL Sports, all in caps. For new customers to play $5, you get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Well, to continue on a kind of a rough note, which is definitely not good for right now, Montgomery says that he has no update on Tyler Tucker's injury and will have more tomorrow. That's typically not a good sign if you got to wait a day for it.
Well, I mean, they're probably getting it scanned and waiting on results. So fingers crossed that they come back positive and not, detrimental.
I mean, it probably says, most likely he's not playing on Wednesday, but hopefully as of right now, you hope it's just nothing bad, nothing torn, nothing super pulled. And hopefully he's just not out. Even if it's just for the rest of the series, hopefully not out for the remainder of the postseason, and even worse into the beginning of next season. That would be the absolute worst. So hopefully Tucker is all right. But hopefully, just turning around, and the biggest thing, we just hope he's all right. I think that's the biggest thing right now.
Jacob, I've got a question for you to kind of pivot here. Kind of go back to the depth scoring of the St. Louis Blues and how they had success in, generating the result and the win at home tonight through their depth scoring. Blues got it started with Jake Neighbors, who also ended up with 2 additional assists besides his goal tonight. What did you think about Jake Neighbors' game, and why was he so successful and hard for the Winnipeg Jets to handle, kind of popping up all over the score sheet tonight?
I think it's just a style that Neighbors plays. It's a very rare style where, he plays a very gritty style, but with a lot of flash as well. I mean, he's very skillful. He can move the puck very well, and I think that's what we saw today. But at the same time, there's typically a difference between gritty guys who they don't move the puck as much, don't score as much, but they get into those deep areas. But then obviously you get the flashy guys like Kyrou who get the puck a lot, but you don't usually see him down in the corners, or you don't see him, parked out in front of the net. Neighbors really does it all. And I think that's something that a lot of teams struggle to try and cover. And you see Neighbors dancing around, spinning and twirling in the offensive zone to make a play towards the net. And then we'll go right in front of it and put his little butt right in front of Hellebuyck and sit and wait for something to hit him. I mean, that's exactly the kind of style he plays. And I think that's what makes him so successful, is because his style of play makes him so pretty much a utility forward across the board. He's all over the place, and he's not afraid to be there. I mean, plus we've seen him fight. So he's a tough guy as well, along with being a shifty guy. And you don't usually get that very often. And I think that's why he's, much like looking at the chat right now, like a Scott Mellenby pointed out here from Charles Nelson Riley. Again, it's just that style of plays. It's very rare to see. And I think that's what he bounces all of his success from, is he'll bounce a guy off the boards, pick up the puck, and just start dancing with it. And you don't see that very often with a lot of guys nowadays. And I think that's what it was a slow start for him tonight, but I think we slowly started today, or he's, started to pick it up and then started right at the end of the first period and ran it out the door with it.
Yeah, and I know I see Ace popping up in chat talking about the Bull Duke check to put the guy on the bench was awesome too. But I think that perfectly aligns. I think that perfectly aligns with the conversation that we're having here too. And I completely agree with you that that level of utility and almost that hybrid type of player that can provide physicality, in the event that he's not finding the score sheet, but can also provide, offensive possession time, playmaking ability, pretty solid shot, and then a net front presence that's, arguably one of the best on the team in Jake Neighbors. I think the young guys are having such an impact on these games because they're able to change their play style based on what the other team is giving them. And I think that's something that I know Jamal Mayers has talked about in post games and like all leading up to this series. I think that's an area, like when we get back to the depth scoring, those second lines for the Blues in Shen and Kyrou and Neighbors, and then going up against Nino Niederreiter, Vladislav Nemetsnikov, and then Cole Perfetti. Like, if I'm a Winnipeg Jets fan, that's not a great matchup for me. Just from like a top end, like skill perspective, you've got a tenured veteran in Brayden Schenn who's already won a Stanley Cup before, with a guy in Jordan Kyrou that I believe ended the season as your leading goal scorer, and then Jake Neighbors to go into the battles, bang the bodies, win the puck battles, basically as your puck retriever, and then it feels like harmonious in terms of top level skill, but then also banging the bodies. Like obviously Jordan Kyrou is not going to go out there and throw 6 hits a game, but those other two guys in Neighbors might combine for 20. So that is not a matchup that I'm looking at as a Winnipeg Jets fan, being like, oh, this is where we could take advantage of this team for sure. That top matchup on their line, and Kyle Connor and Scheifele and slotting Iafallo in there, I think has been basically something that they can kind of rest their laurels on and kind of spearhead the team's success. And then, the lines afterwards follow suit in the momentum. But if you go from a line to line basis, in terms of like a guy to guy conversation, I think the Blues will take the cake and the rest of the lines for sure.
A little bit of a St. Louis update. Brewers still on top of the Cardinals, 7-1, bottom of the 7th. See if they can come back. And of course, later tonight, LAFC and St. Louis City will be battling out. I believe that is in town, or no, actually is out in LA tonight. So, I mean, hey, a 6:00 start for an LA start or an LA game will actually be that's pretty good if you ask me. But I think obviously you see in the bottom, Ethan Hannaford, Brenden Schaeffer will join us very, very soon. But I think the one thing I talked about was every single playoff game is different. And I think it stood true today. But I think the difference of what I was the other thing I threw in was usually you don't see too much spillover. But after these 2 games, you saw it kind of spill over from game 3 into game 4. And now it almost seems like the Blues are really in control of the series. And it's something that you don't usually see it very often, in the playoffs where it goes similar game by game, trends continue, blah, 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 blah. It seems like after today, it seemed like it was just kind of a continuation of Thursday's game. And that makes me think that Wednesday is going to continue as well. I mean, the Jets are kind of off their rocker right now. Blues are in full control. They're in their heads at the moment. So it really seems like this is what will certainly spill over into Wednesday and give them a little bit more of a boost. Obviously, the Jets are going to have their own pushback back at home. But, the Blues are kind of in control right now. And I think that'll, spill over a little bit into Game 5 in Winnipeg.
Yeah, and it feels like the path to success and the path to a win, more often than not, especially for teams that kind of play a certain style, the path to a win always looks pretty similar. But like you said, like game to game basis and taking all 3 periods into account, like they're always going to look different. But for the Blues, I think the path to success and the path to a win is everything that we've talked about, especially after those first two games, kind of drilling home, like, here's where we need to improve, right? It's neutralizing the first line of the Winnipeg Jets, creating chaos in front of Hellebuck, sustaining offensive like puck possession, and then just locking it down on defense, minimizing, the chances that Jordan Binnington has to save. And the Blues have done that in these last two games. So if they're able to do that on the road, I think those are all areas that they struggled in the first two away games in this series. So if they can kind of tune that up a little bit, and maybe Texier just as a bigger body in the lineup helps, or maybe getting Suter in there gives you a different look. Like we talk about, all these little tweaks in a series can potentially make the world of difference. Even like, if Winnipeg doesn't start Hellebuck and then Comrie gets in there, and we don't know what Comrie looks like in a playoff game series, and he struggles, like that could be the difference, in the game too. So there's all these small implications that you could change or could potentially change that could possibly dictate the outcome from a game-to-game basis. So it'll be interesting to see how the Blues kind of pivot going back into unfriendly territory in Winnipeg, because if you basically take like 2-game slates, the Blues lost 2 games and then they pivoted and then reacted. And we saw Jim Montgomery kind of make those adjustments from those 2 games. And now we've seen a completely different series of 2 games where the Blues are blowing them out. So it'll be interesting to see how Winnipeg and how successful Winnipeg can be to make the adjustments to what the Blues have done. And they better come correct, because if they're not able to do it, I think the Blues are going to take it to them. And then you come back home riding a 14-game win streak at home with the ability to clinch. Like I said earlier, I think it's curtains on the Winnipeg Jets playoff series.
And being a reminder right now for the chat, Jimmy Snuggerud. I want to talk about him right now. How he's been impressive these past few, and tonight it showed once again. To talk about him just a little bit, how he has just all of a sudden come out. He's from the University of Minnesota, finished off his season, and then exploded right in, and has been proving himself even more here in the playoffs. I mean, he looks like he's been out on the ice for 3-4 years now already in the show. He's been playing incredible.
Yeah, and I think that hockey IQ for him and for the rest of the young guys, I think is massive, right? And that's what we talked about, like the development game to game for those guys, because they're just getting their feet wet in the league, and really the playoffs are a different beast when it comes to the NHL. Like Jimmy Snuggerud's development over the course of this playoff series has been, I mean, nothing short of phenomenal from a game-to-game basis. And really, starting out, it seemed like, okay, he's going to make an impact, putting pucks on net. Like, he's got the shot that plays that everybody talks about since the time that he was drafted. But how can he help, keep pucks in the zone? Or how can he help win those puck battles along the boards? What kind of level of physicality does he bring? And will that be an area for the Winnipeg Jets to exploit in that first-line matchup? And it feels like, in those aspects, along with the team chemistry and kind of figuring out where people are, like having eyes in the back of his head and his playmaking ability, we saw that more on display tonight than even in the games prior. So in the terms of, a 7-game series, what impact could he make there? If you move on to the next round, I think we see an even heightened version of Jimmy Snuggerud. This really feels like, from a developmental standpoint, a big game player that keeps the moment is not getting too big for him, and he's actually growing to seize the moment as the series goes on. So I'm so excited for his development, and I think the world of him, and we'll see what happens as we move on throughout these playoffs in this series and hopefully in the next one.
Well, we got our suits joining us here today. Ethan Hannaford, Brenden Schaeffer, as you can see, hopping on. All right, fellas, give us the rundown. What was the energy like in Enterprise today, and another amazing win from the Blues?
The energy was great. I personally don't know if it quite matched Thursday night, but I think that's to be expected just at the beginning. But then they put Pat Maroon on the big screen and had him chugging a beer, and the place went bananas. So they found a way. If you were concerned about, what's the energy going to be like, the Blues had the solution for that, throwing him on there. Back in a Blues sweater, like it didn't take him long. He's ready to revert back to being a Blues fan. And some of the guys got a kick out of seeing him. And Braden Shen was in the interview room and was asked if he saw it before the game, and he had not seen it. And so some of the writers were explaining, and got a good kick out of that. But unbelievable performance again by the Blues. I think we were on here Thursday night, technically Friday morning, saying, hey, if the Blues are going to win the next one, it's going to be close. It's going to be a tight one. And it was for a while, but then the floodgates opened once again when the Blues were able to get to their game late in the second period. And we saw what this team is capable again. It was just another unbelievable day at Enterprise Center. Kind of feels surreal that the Blues dominated the two games the way that they did, but their message afterwards is the right one. It's a best 2 of 3 now, and we got to find a way to win on the road. And that still remains true, but man, the spirits are high, obviously, after what we've seen the last a couple of games here in St. Louis.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. I mean, it was rowdy early, obviously, when Big Rig was on the Jumbotron. But I do agree that it felt like, any time that you're scoring, nice.
That's what he did.
Very well done.
Slammed it.
Any time you're scoring 2 goals in the first 3 minutes of the game, your place is going to be rocking. So you didn't have that to start the game. Obviously, the Blues were a little bit sloppy at times, not as clean in the first period, I think, as they would have liked to be. And kudos to Winnipeg. I thought that they did a really good job controlling the pace of play in large part in the first period.
Yeah.
So I think that's something to keep in mind. But once the floodgates opened, boy, did they open. And it, we caught the tail end of Winnipeg's head coach speaking with the media. And I don't know how you took this, but it almost felt like we did some things really well for the first 30 minutes and we stuck to our game plan and then we didn't, almost like it was a loss of words of what St. Louis was able to do in the latter bit of that second period to completely flip the momentum of this game.
Yeah, I mean, he was a little flustered. It's like didn't have answers for like, how is it that we weren't able to play this style that we do so successfully? They kind of lost themselves in a road environment, which is obviously not going to be applicable in Game 5. So it's not just going to be roll out of bed in Winnipeg and do the same thing. We know the series is going to change when you send it back there. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to hear from him, although he did say 100% confidence in Connor Hellebuck and they've got to play better in front of him, which is true. I'd have to look at every individual goal and see, okay, was it on the defense? Was it on Hellebuck?
There were a couple that were not on him for sure.
Yeah, but it's a combination of the Blues broke his spirit, but they broke the Jets' spirit in this game. Again, that can change for sure before the next one. But there was a point where, trying to identify exactly where it happened, somewhere in that second period. And then obviously you're up 4-1. You feel pretty good about things, but the Blues scored right away in the third. And then it was clear, like, oh, these guys they're not long for this game. Like the Blues are going to lock this one up. And it's hard to say they have the advantage in the series, guys, because of the fact that they do have to win at their place at some point to be able to advance. But you have to feel great about the way that they've sort of found their game here at home.
Jacob and I talked about it a little bit, but I want to get your guys' thoughts. And I think we talked about it a little bit last game too on the post game. But do you think the success of the Winnipeg Jets throughout the season, winning the President's Trophy, having Connor Hellebuck, who 9 times out of 10 is not going to let in more than 3 goals from the opposition, do you think they were kind of in a prosperous position for the majority of the season, and now that they're facing adversity, they're kind of crumbling?
I mean, they weren't facing adversity. I mean, they were up 2-0. I mean, I think we mentioned in the last post game, right, that at one point the pressure was on them, but they played well enough, and not that the Blues played poorly. They were both very good quality games from both teams, but Winnipeg played well enough to go up 2-0. So it's not like they collapsed under the pressure, right, Brenden? I mean, I don't know if I would say that the way that things have gone these last couple games fit into the entire Winnipeg collapses under pressure, because there wasn't any pressure at that point when you go into Game 3 up 2-0. Now, perhaps you could say that St. Louis and the Blues have found their way into Connor Hellebuck's head, but I think maybe that's a little bit of a different conversation.
I don't know. Yes, it is with Hellebuck, but as it was mentioned by their coach after the game, they stopped playing their game. I believe the reporter said unraveled, because he was maybe quoting one of the Jets players that they had already spoken to. And the coach didn't, sometimes you hear a term like that and you're like, oh, that's not really, he didn't really disagree or argue with that characterization that the team sort of unraveled. He said in maybe whatever it was, the final 8 minutes of the second period, as that started to happen, where the Blues started to score their goals. And so I don't think it's just Hellebuck. It might be two different conversations, but they in this game and really in this environment, the last two games, I think that's a fair way to say is like they did certainly lose themselves today. But whether that translates is such a difficult thing to predict. Like you can't say, the whole series now is going to be that way, because their fans are going to be crazy. Now, it's funny. We spent so much time talking about the start of Game 4 is going to be so critical. And the Blues didn't, in my estimation, start well. Like the first couple minutes, sure, it was energy and everything. But when they didn't score, right, they didn't get that immediate payoff. We saw a period that, for the most part, they were on their heels, and the Jets controlled it for the majority of the time.
And Hellebuck looked really good early in the game. He made some really high-quality saves, and I remember saying to you, like, okay, here we go. We're going to get Hellebuck's best.
Oh, I thought I tweeted it.
Okay,
I said they're going to get to everything they get off him. They're going to earn it today, because clearly he was making some good saves. He looked sharp and locked in early, and it was just a matter of something weird happening. And Jim Montgomery's not going to complain about ugly goals. He says in the playoffs, those are the kind of goals that seem to go in and really spark a team. And Parayko, that flutter puck that he sent toward Jake Neighbors, Neighbors was asked, what did you see? And a lot of times the guy's like, I don't know, I stuck my stick up and it hit it. He said, the puck was moving so slow, I had a chance to line it up how I wanted and get a stick on it. And so, that's one of those things that's really difficult for a goaltender, and it was a weirdly timed play. And so it's something like that almost kind of shook everything from the first period loose. And it wasn't necessarily even as though the Blues went into the room, they got that late goal, so like now here they go. Like the second period took a little bit of time to get involved, but they were blocking shots, they were doing enough. Binnington was great. I thought he made some pretty big saves in some spots where the game turns if they get the one that they're looking for. But they just stuck with it long enough to be able to, really the goal right after the power play that. It was an even strength goal, but you had, some of the fourth liner type of guys out there on the ice.
Yeah, Texier keeps it in.
You pointed that out.
Excellent work along the boards. I mean, it felt like he completely set up that opportunity in multiple different ways. And then Tyler Tucker, who they gave some love to on the broadcast also today about, his offensive skill set being underrated, and talked about how much he likes to shoot the puck as well. And, obviously you hate seeing a guy like him go down and look like a pretty messy collision with the boards. Hopefully that doesn't end up being, too long-term or anything. But fortunately, the Blues have a guy like Ryan Suter, who has all the playoff experience in the world, that's been sitting up here in the upper levels of Enterprise Center the last couple of nights. So, having depth is fortunate in this situation. But, I and a couple of other people made mention of it to multiple players tonight, like, how impactful was Tyler Tucker for this game? But also the crowd, the crowd noticed it too. Chanting his name as he was skating off the ice. Now, are they doing that with anyone? Maybe, but I think there was definitely a little bit of extra love, recognizing the quality of game that he had played up to that point.
Yeah, he drew a penalty too that
against their captain
led to what we're and so it was a great game from him, and we'll see. They didn't have an update injury wise from him after the game.
He said tomorrow. Tomorrow would be more likely.
But that play. It was everybody that was on the ice to score the goal I'm talking about. I can't remember if that was the second or third goal. They all kind of blend together at a certain point, right? But I went back and watched it and noticed that the way that Sundqvist was kind of flashing across the front was just on the Tucker goal, okay. I believe it was. He carries a defender with him, and it was after Texier gets it to Letty. Letty gets it. They had tried those types of plays, and they just had been a touch off. Like the passing wasn't quite as crisp. It wasn't until that moment that it was like everybody was doing in sync on the ice the way they needed to be. Sundqvist flashes across, the defender comes with him, and I think it blinded Hellebuck just a little bit. It might not have even been Sonny. I think it was probably the defender, that his own guy, that where Tucker put it was just the perfect blind spot. And so like they had to work and scrap and claw to be able to get to those moments. And then once they got a little bit of the reward, that's when I think you saw the Jets just sort of fade and goals started coming a lot easier. The Schenn goal was just after a power play that was brutal. It was awful. they didn't get a shot, didn't get one look. They kept turning the puck over. And they had an offside on the power play.
Clear that on that power play? I mean, at least probably 6 times.
Yeah.
And then, but I tell you what, the conclusion of it was beautiful. I mean, once again, Jordan Binnington outplaying Connor Hellebuck. His play with the puck on his stick is excellent and behind the net. And I was wondering, what is he doing? Like, he kind of like carried it behind the net.
Yeah.
He held on to it for a second, but he found, I believe, Neighbors on a stretch pass that exited the zone. And then Neighbors gives it off to Shen. And then Shen finds Parayko. And then at that point, I think Parayko's trying to center it. It deflects off a couple of sticks. And Hellebuck's not able to
in the
secure
crease.
it.
It was
and,
sitting
and
right
Shen
there.
sends it home. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's funny how everything that play was, and I tweeted this, that everything started with Jordan Binnington on that play and his creativity with the puck. He could have easily just sent that back around the boards and you have no momentum. You're fully back to 5-on-5, but because I think they were able to do that the way they did, they caught him on the advantage still, even though the power play had just ended. I thought that was an excellent finish to that power play, even though it wasn't technically a power play goal. I think it still had the effects of one.
Yeah, the crisp play that was lacking, suddenly it was back, and they were making plays like that. And as a collective unit, they just, the Jets had no answer. It was, I was wrong on that. I said it was going to be a tight one if they were going to win. It was tight for a while, and then the Jets folded to me more in this game than the Blues. The Blues took it from them for sure, but they could have kept playing, and they just kind of, once they got behind, it felt like it was curtains.
So this was an excellent comment I saw from Schaeffer in the chat, kind of talking about.
You say dog that you comment?
I don't think it was me.
Not
no,
you?
had to be.
There's no C. There's no C. I can tell you.
Okay. All right.
No C. But he said, I think someone was asking about why the Jets were kind of struggling. And I think he said, I think it's the 7-game series coming to toll. Their players aren't dealing with these hits as well. And something I talked about those first 2 games was I wasn't super happy with kind of the approach because they were incredibly physical those first 2 games. But looking back on it, it seems to now be paying off. They're out really in a way. They might still be matching with the Jets physically now, but I think because they were out hitting, out physicaling them the 2 games and continuing that, staying with them no matter what, it's kind of showing I think the best way to put it is the endurance of this Blues team with the physicality. And it's kind of wearing out the Jets in a way, or at least it kind of seems like it is as of right now. And maybe not completely physically, but almost maybe even mentally with how we're seeing kind of the responses from the Jets later on in these games. Love to hear all the thoughts from all three of you guys on that.
I think that's probably right. And it's kind of wild that we're still seeing that impact because you did have an extra day between games here, despite there being no travel day. It went from Thursday to now Sunday afternoon because of the concerts or whatever that were at Enterprise Center the last couple of days. And it was mentioned by Jim Montgomery after Game 3 that the way they were hitting and finishing checks and being physical, that's where you kind of wish you were right back out there. But the fact that they were able to still maybe see the advantage of that today with an extra day of rest as a series gets longer, that could be a benefit to the Blues. Although it sounds like some of the guys on the Jets that have been out are getting real close to returning. Velarde, I think, is who the Jets coach was talking about, said like he was game time decision. So he's close. Like the way he spoke, I would not be surprised to see him for Game 5.
Especially 3 days. It's 3 days in between.
3 more days now.
2 days of rest. So, but it would be surprising if he's not back.
So like maybe that's something that negates some of what we're talking about, guys. But I do think it's been relevant to this point.
Thomas,
your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's just, dictating the pace of play and the physicality, I think has been massive for the St. Louis Blues. But it's really been their bread and butter as a system, as an organization. Like even going back to 2019, I think the philosophy, and we talked about it a little bit with Jake Neighbors and Zachary Bolduc, like the philosophy for this team is, yes, be able to score goals. Yes, have high-end players. But also, like, you want guys that are able to bring it in multiple facets of the game. So a guy like Jake Neighbors, when he's not finding the score sheet, he can still bury bodies, win puck battles along the boards, keep pucks in the zone, all of those things. And I think Zachary Bolduc as we're seeing firsthand, burying a guy into the bench tonight.
That was awesome.
Oh my God.
Nathan Walker's like,
everybody's like not touching him. Dude,
Yeah.
It would be sweet. I think I saw a tweet or something like if you were allowed to just like if an opposing player gets dumped into your bench, if you could just like hammer on him, like the logistics of that is probably a nightmare for the NHL, but it would look awesome. But yeah, I think all of those things, like having those hybrid level players that you can slot up and down the lineup, provide physicality on the bottom six side. And I think Texier kind of falls into that too, coming over from Columbus, I believe, like he wanted the chance to get top 6 minutes, and he hasn't gotten consistent top 6 minutes here, but he still provides a shot that's able to score, and he still provides a huge body on that bottom six and winning those puck battles and providing that physicality and banging bodies. And I think that's why you keep him going into game 5 and why he's been so crucial for this lineup, taking the spot of Joseph. Like he's a difference maker, even though he's playing a bottom 6 role. And I think that Winnipeg doesn't necessarily have the same amount of those guys as you move lower down the roster and the lineup. And that's kind of the difference in the series that we're seeing so far.
It's interesting as I process this, I felt like today's game was a different kind of physicality. It feels like at least 2 of the first 3 games, but arguably all 3, at times from the Blues at least, has been blind physicality. Where it's just like, we know the Blues are a physical team, but they're not this level of physical. They're not like go out and try to like take someone's head off, like kind of physical. And it felt like that's what it's been at times this series. That's what it felt like. Specifically for me, the ones that stood out were games 1 and 3. It didn't feel like that kind of game today. This felt like, especially for the first 30 minutes of it, was more of a defensively sound game than like blind chaos. The Blues still had 24 hits, but it felt like a much more tactical physicality, if that makes sense. It was timed well, and some of it happened. I think some of it, honestly, was, you could argue, Brenden, for lack of better terminology, spirit crushing at times, where you in the mix with some of those goals that happened in that final 8 to 10 minute stretch of the second period, where you tack on a couple of big hits, you keep the crowd riled up, and I think it's just it goes to show that like momentum can be shown and carried in ways besides just goals, right? And I felt like that 8 to 10 minute stretch of the second period was more than just the Blues' ability to score. It was the physicality that matched it as well. But like I said, I didn't feel like this game was necessarily to the level of physicality, but I think that that's okay, because we've talked all series long about how the Blues haven't had their legs in the third period. Now, the last couple of games, they haven't had to have them quite to the same level because the games haven't been as close. So I think the first couple of games, I would say that it was actually in favor of Winnipeg, but I think the Blues have played well enough early in games to where they've had the luxury of not being able to have that necessity when it comes to having that same level of physicality. I still think that once these final 3 games, it's still going to come down to they're going to be close. These 2 teams want this series bad. There's no doubt that Winnipeg is going to go down without a fight. I mean, there's a long way to go, and I would be shocked if this series does not go 7 games.
That part I don't know. Like if the Blues can get game 5, that's the one where you're like, you come back home to this environment for a game 6 and you could close them out after starting 0-2. I think Blues in 6 is the best chance they have to win it, because if you do have to do it at their place, at that point you wouldn't have been able to win at their place yet going into game 7. Not saying you couldn't do it, but I think the Blues would really love to take what they did well in these 2 games and kind of finding their identity. They used the crowd to do it to an extent, and now they won't have that. But if they can take those same principles with them and find a way to scrap out what I think will be a close game 5, I keep saying that, but if they can do that, who says it has to go 7? I kind of
Hey, I don't.
Blues
I'm
in
not
6.
I'm not saying I'm not in favor of Blues.
No,
in 6.
I'm just saying. Like
I'm just saying that I would be surprised the way that these first 4 games have gone.
it just depends.
If it gets to that point,
If
it doesn't get to that point.
It just depends on how this next one plays out. The Jets are not going to fold at home. Like they're going to have the crowd behind them, so they'll be they'll be ready for 60 minutes, I would think. And the Blues, this was the first game that I think definitively the Blues got better as it went, where they didn't like their first period, and they were able to still find it. That didn't tank the entire day.
Yes.
Whereas it almost was like in the previous games, they were playing with such energy that it was hard to sustain it, especially in Winnipeg. And so maybe that's something that they can learn from, okay, how did you get to your game that way and find a way to break through? And maybe that's something they can use in game 5 as well.
It does feel to me like the biggest difference in the physicality between the Blues and the Winnipeg Jets. And I think, Ethan, you were kind of touching on this too. But it feels like the Blues, when they're going in, banging bodies, burying guys into the boards, it's always puck hunting first, right? Like, yes, you want to go in there and leave a stamp on the guys, like back of the jersey, or, make them feel you in the ice packs tomorrow. But it's always to separate the player from the puck and then move the puck and keep going. It feels to me like this Winnipeg Jets team right now is, finding themselves in certain scenarios where they're chasing checks or they're getting their wires crossed and, going out and hunting the player as opposed to hunting the puck. And then they end up behind the play. And next thing you know, the Blues are up 4 goals and they're, back in the series 2-2. So I think that for me is the focal point and the difference right now in the Blues and the Jets levels of physicality.
Yeah, I'm seeing a comment that we're in Hellebuck's head now. That's what the conversation feels like. And like I said, I don't know how many of those you would directly assign to Hellebuyck and say, oh, that, he should have had that. But at a certain point, when you're giving up this volume, it's going to be on a combination of got to play better in front of him. And then the goaltender's thinking about it for sure. The next guy came in, did a nice job, but it definitely sounds like, even though the other night I know Jacob asked a question, we were like, what do you do with Hellebuyck after 7-2? And we're like, oh, come on, Jacob, like that's ridiculous. And then today I'm sitting next to Ethan going, kind of wondering myself.
I was going to ask that same question just to see what the reaction was.
He's still going to play, but it's surreal that it's like we don't feel silly for talking about it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think the key will be they're going to go back to their place, and he plays much better there than he has recently on the road. But at the same time, what happens if the Blues get an early one? You never know.
Are you starting him? Are you starting?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I am.
There
was still 0% chance that I am not starting him in game 5. I mean, the resume speaks for itself. You can say what you want about the playoff struggles, but I mean, how bad would it look if they did not start him and they end up losing the series?
Right. You can't live with that as a coach.
If you go down, you go down with your guy.
What's interesting to me is I think Jets fans there's a lot of Jets fans saying the opposite right now. And it's not because Connor Hellebuyck is your best option to win, but I think they're at the point right now where he's proving to them that playoff Hellebuyck is a very real thing. I mean, his save percentage over the course of playoff history, throughout the course of his career, has diminished every single time. So, yes, regular season Connor Hellebuyck is a nightmare to deal with. Lights out, Vezina winner, probably back-to-back. But if the lights are too bright for him in the playoff series, and you've got a backup goalie in Comrie, who really, by all accounts, in terms of backup goalies, we've seen, Jordan Binnington and Ville Husso and Charlie Lindgren and all of these times, we've seen a lot of 50-50 splits for the St. Louis Blues, even going back to Binnington and Allen and all that stuff, and even going back before that with Allen.
Yeah.
This was as far away from that as you could possibly ask. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck was starting almost every game for the Winnipeg Jets throughout the course of the season.
Like 65 games.
Yes. So, maybe it's a question of, is the workload catching up to him? But then if you throw Comrie in there and he hasn't played nearly as many games, do you have a strong enough sample size to trust him in playoff implications? And do the Blues even get a good scouting report on him because they have that small of a sample size throughout the course of this season? I think there's a lot of question marks going on there. But if I'm a Winnipeg Jets fan, for us, it's easy, right? Because we know Jordan Binnington's big game Binnington. You slot him in the playoffs by default, close your eyes and see what happens. But with Hellebuyck and the resume that he's put together in the playoffs and not coming nearly close to the level of play that they've seen in the regular season, it feels like to me that Winnipeg Jets fans are finally I've had enough of this guy. Give me somebody else in net.
Which is hilarious.
Right. It is crazy.
So ridiculous.
But that shows you, you talked about pressure, Ethan, and how there wasn't any. And now suddenly
there is, yeah.
I think nationally too, like what's being said nationally about this series, where it didn't look at all like one where we would be having this conversation a week later, right? So the idea that Jacob asked the question after game 3 and we're like, okay, yeah, whatever. Now it's surreal that it's actually beyond just like, oh, you never know. It's like a real conversation, but for the Jets, it's not. Like they're going to play this guy and I think rightfully so with what he's been able to do this year. And again, at home, I think he's going to find that comfort level. But you talk about a scouting report. The scouting report on Hellebuyck is like, throw pucks at him. They didn't do enough of it in games 1 and 2, and they made an emphasis, the Blues did, in 3 and 4, and have figured out a way to just stick with that. Even when it doesn't produce immediately, they've been relentless in doing it. And then he gets off his game or the Jets in front of him get off their game, and you start to find the rewards with much more frequency. So that's going to be the key is like, can they continue to take that mentality and just throw pucks at him? Don't make the rebounds all these easy chances to be able to see the Jets, who are a very good offensive team, get out and run the other way. They're doing a great job of that in games 3 and 4.
The final thing that I'll say, I know we got to wrap here in a second. In games 3 and 4, Connor Hellebuyck has saved 32 of 43 shots. That is a 74.4 save percentage. Overall, through the first 4 games of the series, 65 of 82. That is a 79.2 save percentage. So your St. Louis Blues are finding ways to put it in the back of the net against the, without a doubt, best goalie in hockey. Even if the Blues do not finish out this series on top, why
would you even go there?
What I'm saying is that what they've been able to do, especially following, it felt like everyone in St. Louis after that 3-game stretch where they lost those 3 at the end of the regular season was like, it's over, we're done, we're going to get cooked by Winnipeg. And I think that the Blues have shown a lot of tenacity.
Yeah.
But I also think, and I saw a tweet about this earlier, is that like they're really starting to finally find that identity again since for the first time since losing Dylan Holloway. These last 2 games, they've looked like a completely different team in that sense of it doesn't feel like they're recovering and trying to figure out the line chemistry, especially on the top 6 without Dylan Holloway.
And what the Jets, being the best team in hockey during the regular season, affords them is the luxury to now, as long as they win their home games, they can still get out of this series and then from their perspective get healthier as the playoffs go along. And this can just be like a bad little dream for them that doesn't cost them their season. However, if the Blues, you look at the way the Blues played in Winnipeg, close games, close losses, but close games. These were not close. The Blues dominated these 2 games. And so through 4, the Blues have been the better team. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But the Jets have that luxury where they're going to get 2 out of the next 3 at home if 3 games are played. Ethan said he was maybe thinking 7 games. I want to make you guys give a prediction on this series before we get out of here. I said Blues in 6 before the season began, I believe, on my radio show for KTGR. So we got 6 from Jacob, 6 from Thomas. Ethan, are you going to tell us Blues in 7? Because that's a dicey way to live.
Yeah, I'm going Blues in 7.
Oh!
Put your hair on it. Put your hair on it.
Wow. You got to put your hair on it. That's interesting. we could set this up. I saw a comment about
Let's do it again.
There's
more
just
sports hub bald.
too much of it is my problem, right? That's why it looks like it looks
bald.
Ethan's got more hair than me.
Nope.
Maybe he could go for the Jet series. I'll go for the next one. What I don't know. What do you,
it would have to be like Stanley
That would
Cup.
be awesome.
Even give me the
we win the Stanley Cup and we're all just Stone Cold Steve Austin like naked heads.
Yeah,
That'd be
you
hilarious.
guys. You guys.
That would be hysterical.
I'm not that.
No, Jacob's shaving the beard. I mean that.
Whoa!
Gotta hit you where it hurts. We gotta hit you where it hurts.
This is never leaving. This is not happening. Not happening. All right, we gotta get going.
Come on.
Can't do it. Before we go, kind of similar, I want to get a 1-word answer for how we're feeling going into Game 5 Wednesday from all 3 of you. 1 word, no more, no less.
Optimistic.
Optimistic. Brenden?
Steady. I think things are steady right now.
I said 1 word, Brenden. I said 1
word.
word.
My word was steady. Series is steady. They're in a good spot.
And Thomas, final thoughts.
I'm going to go with electric. I think regardless of what happens in this series, this has been an electric series. I think the Blues have the momentum. Electric is my word.
Well, we got electric, steady, optimistic. I'm just going to say good. And we've proven that we cannot.
He's giving me crap. His word's good. Good.
Hey, I got to be simple. I'm feeling, I'll change it to feeling great going into
That's 2
Wednesday.
words.
And we've also proven that we cannot answer a question in less than 5 words. That's what you'll get from all of us. Thank you once again for joining us on a fantastic post-game show. Thomas Welch, Ethan Hannaford, Brenden, Schaeffer. Couldn't do it without the fans as well. Thank you everyone for joining the chat, watching, and especially pitching in. Couldn't do it without you guys. So for these 3, I'm the 4th, Jacob Stanoch. This has been Blues Hub postgame on Sports Hub STL. Let's go Blues.